Hey everybody, Chris here. Welcome to another episode of Cardboard Dragon Reviews. Today we are taking a look at Codenames, which is a party style game for 2 to 8 players, recommended for ages 14 and up, and takes about 15 minutes to play. But to play the regular sort of ruled version, you need at least 4 players to do that. So what's going to be happening is players are going to split up into 2 roughly equal teams, and they're each going to nominate one person to be the Spymaster for them, and that Spymaster is then going to be giving clues to their teammates to try and get them to guess the names of agents who are out in the field here. These are their code names, and they're going to try and get them to guess their own colored agents and avoid picking the opponents, and also avoid picking the deadly assassin who will cause them to lose the game. So let me go ahead and give you a quick overview of how this game is actually played, and then let me give you my thoughts on the game. As it proudly declares on the bottom of the box there, it's a #1 party game on BoardGameGeek, which, as of this recording in March of 2016, that is still accurate. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at how this game is played. Alright, so to start here, we need to lay out 25 cards, and they need to be in a 5x5 grid. And you'll see there are a ton of cards that come with this game, like just a bunch, and they're all double-sided, so there's lots of replayability in that sense. So we'll lay those out on the table. Then we need to divide evenly into 2 teams. So as evenly as possible, 2 versus 3 is okay, something like that, but as evenly as you possibly can get it. There will be a blue team and a red team, so you'll decide what each color each team is, and then each team nominates one person to be the Spymaster. The Spymasters for red and blue need to sit on the same side of the table as each other, and all the other players go to the other side of the table. Those players who are at the other side of the table are the field operatives, and the 2 opposing players on the same side of the table are the Spymasters, who are going to be giving the clues. So how a game works is each team is trying to get each Spymaster is trying to get their team members to guess a certain number of words on the board here. It's either going to be 9 or 8. Depending on who gets to go first, and the first team to be able to guess all their words correctly wins the game. Now, how we start is the Spymasters draw one of these cards, and if you can see this, and you can see it's a 5x5 grid, you'll probably get a good idea already of how this game actually is played. So what this represents is a matching grid between this card and what's on the board. So we can see that, for instance, the top, what would be your top right, Jack, is colored blue on this. So that means it's a blue clue. The blue Spymaster wants his team to guess this card. You see that these 3 down here are red clues. The red Spymaster wants his team to guess those. You see, for instance, the bottom corner here, Tooth is like a yellowy brown. That's a neutral one. That's neither blue nor red. You don't really want to pick that, but it's not the end of the world. What is the end of the world is if you pick the black one, which is the top here. That is the assassin. If you pick that, that ends your game immediately and your team loses. So this card is picked and it's put into the stand here, so only the Spymasters can see it, but I'm just going to leave it down just for the sake of our video here. So how this works is you can see around the outside edges of the card is blue. There's like blue lights. That means that blue gets to go first. And what that means is the blue team needs to take, there's one extra tile that's red and blue on both sides. That goes to the starting team. So they have to guess 9 clues. The other team only has 8 clues on the grid here. So starting with the blue Spymaster, they need to give a clue to their team that relates to some of the blue names here, words here on the board. So for instance, they might say movies 3. And that's the way you have to give clues. It's a single word followed by a number. So what that means is there are 3 words on this board that the Spymaster is saying relate to movies that he wants his teammates to pick. So now it's up to the operatives to determine what 3 words he's talking about. So you always have to make a single guess. So the blue team looks at this and they say, well, let's go with Hollywood, because Hollywood makes movies. And indeed, we can see on the grid that is a blue clue there. So it gets laid down like that. So they can then, the blue team can then continue guessing because they got a correct answer up to 3 times. And you're actually allowed to go over the number that the Spymaster gave you. So 3 is the most guesses they can make, but they actually go 1 over. They can make 4 guesses. So they can continue on here if they want, or they can stop and pass play to the red team. And they might go, okay, well, let's go with model. There's often models in movies, so they'll point to that, and the Spymaster looks at the grid, well, that's not a blue clue, that's a neutral clue, and they cover it up. Guessing a neutral clue ends your turn. If you were to have guessed like a red clue, like bug here, that gives a point to the opposite team, and your turn also ends and play passes to them, so that's pretty bad. But like I said, the worst thing to do is pick up here, which is the black clue. That's the assassin. You lose the game immediately if you pick that. Now, the Spymaster isn't supposed to be saying anything during this except for those 2 words, and they're not supposed to be making faces or anything like that. They're not supposed to be giving any hints as to how good their team is doing. They can also give, so they have to give their rules in the book, and I encourage you to go over these with your fellow players beforehand about what are considered valid and invalid clues, and make an agreement among yourself about how you're going to do that. So for instance, in the book they talk about you have to give a clue that relates to the actual word on the table, or one of the words here. So for instance, the example they have is England is on the table. Gland is not a legal clue for England. Okay. You also can't use words that are already on the board unless they've been covered up already as clues, or like sort of parts of them, like ship. We couldn't say shipping. We couldn't say fly. We couldn't say engine. Stuff like that. Good night. It couldn't be used. Things like that. And I think that's sort of about it, actually. The game ends when one team gets all their clues out on the board, whether they did it actively or their other team screwed up and gave them all of their clues. And so that's actually about it. There's a couple kind of special ways you can give clues that are explained in the book that relate to the number you give after. For instance, you could say, I don't know, movies 0. We could use that example again. What the person, the Spymaster is saying is none of the cards none of what he wants you to guess relate to movies. So this usually comes into play later in the game if there's a bunch of like similar things on the board and you can make the connections between them in your head. You can say, well, none of what we're talking about relates to this word. And then the team gets an unlimited number of guesses to go through that. You can also give a clue of infinity or unlimited, and that just lets you, movies unlimited lets your teammates guess until they just want to stop talking or stop guessing. And that's really all there is to the game. There is an app for this game, and I do recommend you use it. It's free, and it really just helps you with timing. I think there's some other maybe things in it, but I only use it as a timer to trigger people to think faster, or so the game doesn't drag on, because depending on who you're playing with, of course, if they're, analysis paralysis, AP, this could take forever with them deciding what to do. So I think that's everything, and let me go ahead and give you my final thoughts on Codenames. All right, final thoughts time for Codenames. So the thing that I like about this game is definitely maybe a little bit more strategic than some other party style games that play in the same length. There's a good amount of thinking that goes on with making sure you're not giving terrible clues that are going to screw people up. And on the other side, trying to get inside somebody else's head and trying to make the same connections that they make. Those kind of games are really fun. It reminds me of another review I've done on Mysterium. Now, I do prefer playing this game as the Spymaster versus the Field Operative by a pretty good margin. I think the component quality is good. I think the simplicity of this game is awesome because it is a party game. Just about anybody can play, especially if you put them on a field operative side, and especially if they have a partner there. It's not difficult at all to play. Now, this is all going to be subjective to who you play with and your group, so take all this stuff with all my reviews with a grain of salt and form your own opinion. But for me, as a board game player who buys these games himself, I would not want to play this game with more than 6 people. And the game says you can play with 8 or more. I think that would be a terrible time, because you think about with 6, it's going to be one Spymaster, and then 2 aside to be discussing the clues that the Spymaster has given them. Now you add another person there, and for an 8-person game, and then suddenly there's a committee of 3 people making decisions about clues. It's not that intense of a process that you need that many people doing it, and I think that would get boring. So I do not want to play this game with more than 6 people. I think 6 is the perfect number for this game. And if we go over that, I would rather play something, I don't know, The Resistance or even Mysterium. And part of that is there's not a whole lot of player interaction when you compare with other sort of party style games. Like, the Spymasters can't talk a lot, and that's part of the game, but the teams don't really talk to each other either. So the real only interaction is between the field operatives on the same team. And yes, you do pay attention to what the other team is doing, because what clues their Spymaster gives could give you hints to what you don't have, for instance. But it's just like you compare it to something like I said, a Resistance or Sheriff of Nottingham or Time's Up. There's not as much interaction between players. So that may be okay for you. That might even be a better thing for what your group likes. For my group and for me, we like something that's a little more interactive. And that also relates to another point. This game isn't really funny, which you might not care about at all. For us, though, these kind of games, we prefer them to be a little bit more lighthearted. Like, I didn't laugh playing this game at all, and that's not the point of this game. But if you're going to play a party game, that might be an important thing for you, is to have more of a funny comedy feel to the game. And this game is fun, don't get me wrong, but not funny. And I hope that makes sense. But with that being said, this is still an excellent game, and I do recommend you get it if it seems interesting to you. Just about anybody can play this, and it's pretty strategic, actually, when you're trying to think of the good clues to give to your field operatives. So I really enjoyed playing the Spymaster in this game more. Now, number 1 party game on BoardGameGeek, I don't agree with that, just personally. And again, that's my opinion. Take it or leave it. It's a 7 out of 10 for me. It's still a really good game, but it is not, to me, the best party game. So that's about it. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please go ahead and like and subscribe to my channel. And I apologize for the delay. It's been like 4 months since I did my last video, which is just terrible. So hopefully I will pick up that pace. I've been playing a lot of games lately, so I've got lots of stuff to review. It's just a matter of getting all the videos done. So please like and subscribe. There's more to come, and leave any feedback you have on the videos or your thoughts on my game. And again, I'm just a guy playing board games. These guys have the stats to back it up that they're the number one party game based on a lot lot of people's opinions. Mine's a bit of a dissenting one, so take that with a grain of salt. And until next time, this has been Chris for Cardboard Dragon Reviews. Keep your dice on the table.